Good morning, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I suggest that we should start now. I apologize for this small delay, traditionally, but now we are all here, and today we are going to discuss the institutional design of Russia's economy. We tried to diversify our panel, gathering the representatives of research, the government, and real technical business. On my way here, I read an article in Vedomosti newspaper dated yesterday, and I wanted to start with this article. It said exactly the following: as the specialists fully agree on economic measures that are to be taken, they all exactly know how to improve investment climate and to undertake a structural reform and so on. I would request you all not to follow this traditional pattern. Let's talk about real business today, and I hope it's a good opportunity to discuss what we can do today, what we should do in order to transit to the real technical model of economic development. This is quite a bearded subject. I can remember back 15 years ago, the term diversification of economy was very popular. They did not talk about rent-based model or the technical model, but it meant exactly the same. And now Russia's economy is in a difficult situation, and it gives us both challenges and opportunities. I think that many decision makers recognize these opportunities, and so they have launched several valuable initiatives. I think the National Technology Initiative is number one of them all. It's really a top priority, and it introduces a revolutionary approach, which goes against the background of traditional Russian initiatives. It focuses on the consumer and his demand. So the approach to technologies is based on the market demand rather than available technologies. Yesterday morning, I chaired another discussion here. It was dedicated to the National Report on Innovations. We recollected this National Technology Initiative too, and mentioned the required reforms in institutions and the required measures of support. We defined what was required to build a new economic model. It's inevitable, but we need to transit to this model smoothly with minimum losses. Today, we have prepared several questions to be discussed. Number one, I think they are all straightforward and understandable. Is it possible to create an efficient and effective system of national and technology initiatives in the current circumstances, how to restructure the institute in order to adjust to the new objectives. The next one is who should initiate changes and what steps are needed and what would it cost? Can we sacrifice stability of the system for the sake of progress? Today, we have two deputy ministers here. They represent the institution playing leads in economic restructuring. It's the Ministry of Economic Development. It's the Ministry of Economic Development of Russia and the Ministry of Education. Let me now give the floor to Oleg Fomichov. He represents the Ministry of Economic Development of Russia, and he is a deputy minister. He will talk about the necessary steps in order to provide development.
Как всегда, прогадал. Минэкономразвитие в прогнозах последние пару лет очень бывает неточно. Если говорить по тем вопросам, которые поставлены, начну на самом деле даже просто краткого комментария о том, что Игорь Рубенович сказал. Действительно, в 2002 году была впервые поставлена задача подготовить некий комплекс мер по диверсификации. Я тогда был молодым специалистом Министерства экономического развития Герман Оскарович Греф, который тогда был министром, такую задачу перед нами поставил. 2 года как страна так начала очень быстрыми темпами выходить, начиная там на самом деле с конца 99-го, начала выходить из кризиса, и уже к середине 2002 года было понятно, что мы плавно вползаем в модель голландской болезни. И было понятно, что нужно с этим что-то делать. Вот с тех пор, как постановка задачи прозвучала и был подготовлен первый тогда очень слабый план по диверсификации экономики, задача действительно так и стоит. Просто тогда ни у правительства, ни у Минэка не было ни одного инструмента, как сейчас мы понимаем, для того, чтобы диверсификацию обеспечить, потому что не было ни одного института развития, не было инструментов структурных институциональных преобразований, не было вообще возможности направлять какие-либо ресурсы, хоть финансовые, хоть административные, по тем направлениям, которые эту диверсификацию должны обеспечивать. Не знаю, хорошо это или плохо, с тех пор, наверное, и инструменты созданы, институты созданы, но диверсификация все равно по-прежнему пробуксовывает, поэтому, может быть, и проблема не в этом. Значит, возможно ли выстроить эффективную систему реализации НТИ в существующих условиях? Наверное, возможно. Мы ровно этим сейчас пытаемся заниматься совместно с ОСИ, совместно с РВК, совместно со всеми ведомствами. В первую очередь это Минобрнауки, который у нас здесь координирует деятельность в значительной степени в части нормативно-правовой базы под НТИ. Но возникает, безусловно, очень много проблем, потому что на примере реализации проекта НТИ мы, собственно, сталкиваемся со всеми теми вопросами, про которые Игорь Рубенович нам в начале сессии запретил говорить. Значит, и первое, с чем мы сталкиваемся, это не очень большая гибкость и эффективность системы государственного управления, потому что как только вы начинаете помещать очень инновационный проект, визионерский, в такое прокрустово ложе действующих административных процедур, способов финансирования и так далее, у вас очень сильно тормозятся сразу все процессы. То, что мы сейчас видим, но мы все-таки пока настроены оптимистично на то, что нам удастся найти некую модель сосуществования инновационного проекта где-то на стыке системы государственного управления, частного финансирования, такой в хорошем смысле private-public partnership. Но опять же, ничего не гарантировано, потому что проект инновационен сам по себе, и выстраивание эффективной системы реализации это еще тоже является на самом деле инновационным проектом с неопределенным будущим, но с возможностями получения хорошей прибыли. Как перестроить институты под задачи поддержки технологических инноваций? Вопрос вопросов. Вчера, я так понимаю, с утра это все дело обсуждали. Мы это обсуждаем тоже уже последние, не знаю, 5-7 лет. Инновационная стратегия этому была посвящена. и до сих пор посвящена, каким образом нам перестроить институты под вопросы поддержки инноваций. Значит, но на самом деле все, что нужно перестроить, как раз я здесь согласен с Игорем Беновичем, более-менее понятно, при том, что перестроения-то они на самом деле одинаковые. Они одинаковые как для поддержки инноваций, так и для поддержки малого предпринимательства, так и для развития бизнес-климата в регионах. Собственно, набор этих институциональных изменений, он, за редким исключением, безусловно, инновационной политики есть своя специфика, есть какие-то точечные инновационные решения, которые можно проводить и в законодательстве, и в правоприменении, которые именно на инновационный сектор воздействуют. Но в целом такая общая поляна, она понятна, но вот вопрос действительно, как их провести. Но поскольку, опять же, Игорь Рубенович нам запретил про них говорить, вот, про эти самые институты, которые он вопрос задал, но потом сказал, что нельзя. Ну, как? Законодательство – это только начало. Вот у нас Сан Саныч здесь сидит, он скажет свое веское слово, он у нас видный институционалист. Я тоже, когда учился в высшей школе экономики в магистратуре, у меня на самом деле магистерская диссертация была посвящена проблеме импорта институтов. И институциональную экономику я тоже изучал, поэтому могу смело сказать, что с принятием законодательства формализация формальный институт еще как-то может быть установлен, но неформальные институты под этот формальный институт могут меняться потом долгими годами, десятилетиями, могут и вообще не меняться. И проще формальный институт потом адаптировать к тому неформальному, который в обществе сложился. Вот у нас это двустороннее движение, оно идет несколько лет. Нельзя сказать, что ничего не сделано, потому что инновации в стране есть. Есть целыми кластерами. Во многих регионах России создана уже более-менее удобная экосистема для того, чтобы инновации создавались, воспроизводились. Но если говорить о стране в целом, такой экосистемы нет и такой институциональной основы нет для того, чтобы инновации в том объеме, который мы перед собой ставим в качестве цели, чтобы они воспроизводились. Но лиха беда начала. Радует только то, что сейчас в условиях текущей экономической ситуации стимулы для институциональных изменений сильны как никогда. Как я уже сказал, если институциональные изменения будут благоприятствовать бизнес-климату, малому бизнесу и так далее, они автоматом будут решать огромное количество проблем, с которыми сталкивается, собственно, инновационная активность. Кто должен выступить инициатором изменений? Ну, мне кажется, вопрос риторический. По каждому изменению наверняка есть и уже есть сейчас инициатор, который больше получает, больше всего выгод от этого изменения. В каком-то случае это само государство, если речь идет об эффективности его деятельности. В тех случаях, когда эти изменения затрагивают прежде всего условия действия бизнеса, конкретных бизнесов, то, безусловно, бизнес должен выступать инициатором, но в любом случае, кто бы ни был инициатором, проводить их все равно придется государству совместно с бизнесом, с гражданским обществом. Без этого никак не получается, потому что, еще раз, если государство действует в одиночку, то все заканчивается созданием формального института. А чтобы институты работали, нужно, чтобы под формальными институтами были соответствующие, подкрепляющие эти формальные институты, модели поведения, стимулы, опять же, формальный, неформальный, целый ряд других условий. Какие шаги необходимы, какова их цена, можно ли пожертвовать устойчивостью сложившейся системы ради прогресса? Ну, мне кажется, что вот в последние особенно полгода система не является настолько устойчивой, чтобы ей уже нельзя было жертвовать, потому что экономическая ситуация приводит к тому, что действительно очень много направлений, по которым нужно, видимо, в ближайшее время необходимо будет достаточно срочно принимать решения. Поэтому устойчивости, поскольку нет, жертвовать ей уже теперь можно. Но вот какие шаги необходимы и какова их цена, это такой вопрос вопросов. Я думаю, что никто не ожидает, чтобы за минуту были перечислены все необходимые шаги, которые необходимо для этого предпринять. А цена на самом деле, ну, это же вопрос философский, да. Здесь же речь не идет о том, что нужно направить там весь бюджет на какие-то гигантские инновационные проекты. Цена институциональных изменений, она очень сложно рассчитывается. Есть какие-то прямые издержки, есть непрямые. В любом случае цена всех этих институциональных изменений, безусловно, будет гораздо меньше, чем те результаты, которые могут в результате быть получены, если правильно их проводить. Вот. А необходимые шаги, опять же, возвращаясь к тому, что Игорь Рубенович говорил, они в значительной степени все понятны. Вот. Я, поскольку занимаюсь вопросами не только инноваций в министерстве, но вопросами совершенствования госуправления, вопросами поддержки малого бизнеса и так далее, вот на мой личный взгляд, шаги, которые нужно предпринять в качестве первого и необходимого условия для того, чтобы мы дальше двигались, это все, что связано с совершенствованием системы госуправления. Как в части госрегулирования экономических процессов, установления требований, контрольно-надзорной деятельности и целый ряд других вопросов, так и в части внутренней эффективности самого государства, административных процедур, порученческой системы, деятельности органов власти и так далее. Потому что пока мы не настроим, собственно, субъекта изменений институциональных, то проводить их, ну, честно говоря, достаточно сложно, что мы и видим в последние годы. Спасибо.
Спасибо, Олег Владиславович. У меня вот в процессе того, что вы говорили, особенно в конце, возникло два, так сказать, комментария, которыми хотел бы поделиться. Начну со второго, как раз по поводу госуправления и качества госуправления. Больше 10 лет назад, еще когда я работал в Microsoft, мы делали некое исследование, которое потом было даже опубликовано в «Вопросах экономики», по анализу корреляции темпов роста ВВП на душу населения в мире с разными индикаторами, анализируемыми Всемирным банком и World Bank'ом и World Economic Forum, вот по их изданиям на длительном периоде. И выяснилось тогда, меня лично интересовала тогда тема, насколько коррелируются как раз темпы экономического роста с темпами, с развитием информационных технологий, как бы технологической части экономики. И выяснилось, что действительно очень сильно скоррелированы. Там из 10 наиболее коррелированных индикаторов 7 было связано с информационными технологиями. Но на первом месте по уровню корреляции стоял как раз индикатор качества государственного управления, синтетический индикатор, считаемый World Economic Forum. Соответственно, вот это, судя по всему, становится совершенно критической частью в развитии экономическом нашей страны, в том числе и для того, чтобы обеспечить технологическое развитие. Вот этот пункт я предлагаю даже, может быть, дальше немножко об этом поговорить, потому что он связан с другой частью, которая, как мне представляется, должна быть важным компонентом нашего обсуждения, с культурными вопросами, потому что качество государственного управления сильно завязано на традиции и культуру. А второе, вот та часть вопроса, которая была связана с тем, насколько мы готовы там жертвовать стабильностью системы. Ну, вообще надо понимать, что здесь есть и высокие риски, потому что вот та самая статья в «Ведомостях», на которую я в самом начале сослался, она, вообще-то говоря, я процитировал из нее, так сказать, абзац из самого начала, а статья-то вообще про то, что экономическое чудо в большинстве стран случалось после крахов, либо военных, либо революционных. И поэтому вопрос о том, как провести по мягкой траектории, без жесткой посадки, наверное, должен быть тоже чрезвычайно важным и принципиальным. Потому что то, что проводить придется, это, по-моему, уже, в общем, никто спорить не станет. То, что это должно быть сделано все-таки так, чтобы минимизировать затраты, и, как вчера здесь же на Гайдаровском форуме говорилось, не возложить на население опять все те потери, которые, как это было в 1998 году, которые, в общем, практически неизбежно сейчас при прохождении текущего кризиса. Это очень непростая задача. И, наверное, я в связи с этим попрошу следующим выступить Евгения Борисовича Кузнецова, опять-таки, знаете, вот новые информационные технологии, новая технологическая реальность ведет к тому, что зачастую там начинаешь узнавать о чем-то из источников других. Вот я как раз сейчас по дороге, опять-таки, сюда, в машине, в Фейсбуке прочитал то, что, как я понимаю, Евгений Борисович подготовил для сегодняшнего выступления и заранее уже опубликовал. Так что я представляю себе, о чем он будет говорить, и, по-моему, это должно быть очень кстати в рамках обсуждения.
Да, спасибо большое. Действительно, я постарался максимально упростить ту модель перехода, с которой мы столкнулись. И эта модель перехода связана с тем, что мы вышли из прошлого крупного глобального кризиса 98-99, который действительно был очень глубоким структурным глобальным кризисом. Вышли, так скажем, по-медицински недалече.
But we did not get enough treatment. First, we started to shape contemporary economy, and we hear high growth after 99. The economy was quite diversified. If we look at major technological companies that are majors of our economy, they were either set up during that period or they got the second, so to say, birth at that time and were revived and became major Russian companies. But then the economy switched to a rent-based model. And when it turned out that the redistribution and management of rent is much more clear to the state management, now when we're speaking about formal and informal institutes and codification of legislation, so we got into this loophole. The rent-based model is very convenient when we have a compact set of parties between which you can divide the resources and capabilities. So we start moving to setting up better, most favorable conditions for major companies. So they are heavy waiters, but they are better suited for such legislation, whereas minor companies find it difficult. So our institutes, our legislation is very slow-moving, much slower moving than in other economies. And the second example is the famous example about growing the system of grades. You know, we have the archaic system of the people's division by grades or by ranks. We came to the low oil prices when we are running out of commodity. I'm very positive about this crisis because it can provide the bankruptcy of the entire system and the outflow of the excessive resources accumulated in certain structures, which made a certain bias in the economy. But another problem comes in. To retain the rental frames worked for quite a long period of time and shaped very stable, including unstable institutes. The janitor in Gazprom, who has been talked about for so long, so Gazprom takes the first place of to be employer of high school graduates. That proves the supremacy of the rent-based model. All universities, all practitioners, all media, all of them worked to shape the success story of Gazprom. It's a very important factor. Even in the United States, where startup economy is beautifully developing, even the United States had to take a lot of efforts to break the unpositive, the negative opinion about certain startups. Films were made, special books were published to show that the non-standard guys who work in the Silicon Valley is the gist of the earth. to improve his image. And in order to shape correct social strategies, one has to be proactive. First you have to remove social barriers, and then people start migrate to where you want them to. And when we speak about the economies of the future, we speak about the economy where most profit comes from knowledge, technologies, and human intellect. So the key resources is people's brains, education and preparation for economy. So brains and knowledge is very fast moving, and they move elsewhere if they don't like something. So we see masses how people are moving to highly developed startups, to more convenient jurisdictions. And when we lose the standard rent, whereas we do not have conditions for the non-standard rent, for the brains, we are now at the turning point, and earlier we recognized that all major instruments of our policy, cultural policy, institutional design for business, corporate law, state management, state administration systems, state regional systems need readjusting, and the earlier we understand it, the better it can proceed. And the only recipe is counterintuitive. When you're moving fast and everything, something goes wrong, your only desire is to keep tight to the wheel. And when the economy is in distress, you have to relax, which is counterintuitive. You have to release the reins and let the subject act for themselves.
The people want to survive, and they rarely find solutions. The government should help them, but they need to make a clear-cut request of what they need. We don't have to define all development drivers, but we need to give all freedoms to the people, the subjects, who have to survive. As to the National Technology Initiative, we should probably so far create the environment for the coming 10 or 15 years. I mean the culture, educational and technical culture, that management culture also, and it must be proactive. Getting back to what you said now, this is in fact not a new idea. These approaches have been applied already. It was, for instance, back in the USSR time, though it was not really recognized, and now probably it's not so often mentioned. The USSR had some propaganda, and they promoted modernization and the culture of modernization too. This was a political direction, and it was required by the government. They wanted probably and finally, and they wanted to have more technical specialists, and finally the technical professions, for instance engineers, were prioritized, and they were extremely popular for 1 or 2 generations. Eventually we had some surplus engineers and other technical specialists. But anyway, they needed more new engineers in the 50s and the 60s, and finally they trained all specialists they wanted, and so they adjusted the whole system of values to this new demand. This was a goal stated by the government. I think this is positive experience, and now we probably there should be some body in the government which is responsible for propaganda or for ideology, and we should be in touch with this body, and they often, but now everything is done wrongly, and for instance, mass media often propagate some false sciences instead of sciences, technical sciences, real sciences, and so on. In order to do it, in order to do everything properly, we should change the whole environment. Anatoly has mentioned that we already survived the crisis in 1998, and the solution which they found was to liberalize economy for some short time, to let the economy restructure itself. And I think it was quite efficient. I think, by the way, my experience shows that when the government left the economy alone and did not interfere, it was the most efficient periods for the economy. Once the government regained its power and started and picked up, problems emerged. Alexander, you have requested me to follow the agenda, but my logic leads me in a different direction. What about your logic? What did you mean by false sciences that are advertised by mass media? But logic is not a false science at all. This is a true science. Dear colleagues, microphone please. Dear colleagues, I think now I talk as an institutional economist. As our moderator and has hinted. So I am not going to recall this article from Ведомости and what was forbidden in relation to this article. So this idea that the quality of institutions is to be improved, and this is the key to everything, dates back to middle 2000. But the institutions are manifolded, and you can't improve them, can't improve our formal institutions if they do not correlate properly with informal institutions. What is the environment for our businessmen? They have to coexist with tax authorities and with all other agencies. And what are informal institutions? What I mean by informal institutions is the mentality, the thinking of people. It's the ideas that they have. It's their thinking. And they live in free environment. So, and there's another factor which is unpleasant, and it was proven about 5 years ago. Initially, we thought that Russian institutions all worked poorly, and we had to enhance their quality. But now we have discovered that there are two types of institutions: extra active, that are good to generate rent, and the second group is interactive, that are good for development. Our extra active institutions are really very efficient to generate rent. There was a notorious story with the law on bankruptcy. Presumably, it was to boost rotation and so on, but they really generated lots of rents, but it was due to raiders' activity. But we have to do something else. We have to turn a fox into a cat, literally speaking. And the people who discovered this effect, and I tried to invite them to Russia too, but now this has been cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances. One of these specialists is a half Turk and half Armenian, and so he is not accepted by some countries as a Turk, and he is rejected by other countries as an Armenian. So let's put it like that. How can we turn our fox into a hedgehog? It's difficult indeed. And one and the same nation, not to mention the people, well, let's take Congo, for instance. In Congo, they created new institutions which specializing in gathering rent. And the people in Canada, however, with the same type of economy, created other institutions in order to improve the living conditions of people. Well, if you work in a shift mode at a diamond mine, you may leave for another country. So it so happened that people used to come to Russia for work, including expats. They worked in a shift mode. They had to leave families for long, but they came here not to live, but to work. What shall we do now? I may now put forward some ideas that are doubtful, but let me speak up. If I think some institutions are in demand, let's have them. But first, let's ask a question: who needs these inclusive institutions? Probably it's the environment for the human capital of high quality. And who in Russia needs a high-quality human capital? No one needs, I think, because we have very primitive economy, though with high income. And we have to choose one of the two options. Either we find some solution, and the human capital can't do anything in the political arena if it exists only in economics. So I think the first option is to increase demand for high-quality human special capital. I meant Igor. During long ago, and we discussed our tax system. Our tax system stimulates the use of guest workers. All guest workers have to pay lots of taxes. That's why, if you want to increase demand for the human capital, someone may want to shift, to transit to a different scale of taxes. Probably it should be rotated, and we should transit to the tax scale with the opposite direction. And as I said yesterday, we should follow some arc now. And now we don't have any demand for the human capital. It sounds too romantic. Everybody wants to prosper, but no one really wants it at his own workplace. What do I mean by walking along an arc? It means moving to another. It means moving to another spot on the same level. We now have the same demand. And what about our defense sector? Let's start with the defense sector. And what shall we target? We can't talk about any spacious development now. It will require some complicated technology solutions. There will be different groups involved, like regional monopolies, structural monopolies, and so on. So I think the demand for human capital will be growing very slowly and gradually. And what about the second question? What about the human capital rate? Let's imagine some country which wants to be the country of raw materials. Do you mean whatever we mean, diamonds, oil, or gas? But it never works like that. Some people may think that there are raw materials and each country is rich in its own raw materials, but the human capital does not matter because it's the same everywhere. But this is a wrong approach. We need first and foremost to learn the specifics of the human capital, not only in all sectors, including in education. And I think that we should first learn the specifics of Russian human capital. Moreover, we should discover regional specifics. We know that people and specialists in Siberia, in Tyumen, are different from people in Sverdlovsk and so on. We know similar companies that introduce different methods of work, different innovations. It all depends on the human capital. So what I mean is we should follow informal approach to this subject. What is the difference between our current media campaigns and old-time propaganda? In the past, the media wanted to create the positive image of new people, but now we are talking about the obstacles that prevent us from doing something useful. this applies in particular to the reform of state administration. And I agree with you partly, but the culture, surrounding culture, is very important for state administration. But I think that this culture and this environment is the same for all, for the state administration and for the people. Many people are conservatives. They try to preserve the existing culture at any rate. And many workers think so, and even deputy ministers think so too, to say nothing of ministers. Therefore, I think in this case, we need to focus on specific problems. We should use our real competitive advantages that are specific to Russian people, but not to Spanish journalists or Japanese people, considering regional specifics and regional differences. And we should address very specific questions. What shall we do in general? Certainly, this is a long-term process, something like similar to growing plants in agriculture. We need to grow some plants. For sure. I can give you some examples. Let's take, for instance, how Berlin Wall fell down. What's the difference between East and West Germany? They're merging, and they're getting closer to each other, and still, even the new generations of Eastern Germans are different from their Western neighbors. And I'm not sure when they will be the same, probably in 40 or 60 years. My conclusion is that it's always a long-term process. So we should, you can't just create a new culture from scratch.
We understand that the lengthy process is, it's not up to the TV, internet, or other technical instrument that will make the effect. Well, it's the prison, the army, and the school that are most efficient. And everything will be explained to you in one of these three sectors. If you have problems at school, you'll get explanations in the army or in prison. And your future images will be different, consequently. Therefore, what I believe, you have a comprehensive system. I keep insisting that, first of all, we shall change our ideas about development. We should not speak about 5 years horizons. We should look into 15, 20, or 30-year horizons with transformations, including cultural policy, changing of institutions, changes in political relationships and structures. It's a lengthy transformation process. Let me reiterate. I am not a proponent of Chinese experiments. I think the success of China is much exaggerated. If you look at the real data, you will see it being a huge country, and it's no wonder it's the second economy in the world. It should become number one many years ago, and it used to be one many years ago. At one time, they created 1/10 of the world's GDP. So when they understood that there should be continuity mechanism, that they should look into long horizons, longer than a human's life, it was not it was not in the Chinese traditions. So first they had a great jump, but then they walked away from it. They say we are starting on a lengthy voyage to achieve the goal which we cannot achieve in this way. So the problem associated with what Saltykov-Shchedrin said. So there are a lot of 5-year changes in Russia, but in 200 years, nothing is changed. So you have to leave this beaten track because Russia cannot take the position that Russia believes it deserves. Thank you very much. Let me ask a clarifying question. So the chaos is in people's minds. What has it to do with culture? I agree and support what you said about the long time periods. A brilliant example. Recently, I paid attention to this. And I never heard it discussed. The Russian-Japan War of 1905. Everybody knows about it from school years. Did anyone try to ask that it was 25 years after revolution? 25 years. Actually, that was in 70s and in the 80s. The process surfaced in 1980. The Civil War was underway. It was the Cultural Revolution, not like in China, but forced westernization. And in 25 years, it resulted in Japan defeating Russia. We have the same in the Soviet Union. When did we get a real competitive science in Russia? In the second half of the 19th century. It was the result of great reforms, a set of great reforms undertaken by Alexander II. We received not only good education, which has been quite contemporary starting from the 18th century, but we received good science capable of creating Nobel Prize winners, such as Mendeleev, etc. Let's not have a gloomy view on our experience. What I'm claiming is that we do have cultural characteristics of human capital which can be used for economic shifts and growth. We are the country which during the 20th century failed to make a competitive car, a refrigerator or TV, but we made a spaceship, a hydrogen and nuclear bomb and spaceships. Well, because we are a culture which can produce one-of-a-piece non-serial products. Can it be used for the contemporary economy? It will not give us an important breakthrough, but we can create some niches like creative industries. We are competitive in such creative industries, aren't we? Starting from the advertising business to Zvaginsky, Konchalovsky. So we are up to this level. Software products as well. The picture I'm trying to draw might look, heavyweight, but it's not gloomy. The objective is not to break the existing culture. No. We should use what we have. That means using human capital rather than rental technologies. And at the same time, we should remove the restrictions which prevent us from going out into broader space. Yes, thank you very much. That's the key issue. And I cannot refrain but say, I was always amazed. There is some cultural pattern. Though we used to speak about the collectivist structure, structure of society, about community. Actually, we are very individualistic, and I'm always amazed that a group of advanced intellectuals, when they get together, do not produce the effect of increasing their overall aggregated product or capital. On the opposite, they stifle each other. Well, typically, a group of intellectuals in Russia are sillier than each of them, are more stupid than each of them. Well, Russia is a country of people, of clever, intelligent people who cannot come to terms with each other. Speaking about cultural capital, I would say that we do not have enough trust of each other. Well, we have communal traditions, but strangely enough, and history proves that it does not go bottom up, but it goes top down. Mr. Pomerantsev said that these are borrowed fiscal technologies brought by Mongolians, brought from China. That is depending on each other on tax payment. When fascist troops occupied Belarus, they restored kolkhozes very fast, because it's very convenient when everybody is responsible for each other. Whereas people are individuals, and sometimes they are extreme individualists. So we have the problem of enhancing trust, compromises, avoiding compromises, because for Russia, compromise is something insulting. Well, the revolution started with the union of compromises, because compromise is a proposal to agree, to come to terms, to agree on something. Very briefly, a very good example about two absolutely contradictory Russian traditions. You mentioned the country of left-handed people. We in Russian culture have a very high creative potential, that is ability for production of technical models. The global economy moves towards the sphere of marginality, moving there. Most margin comes from design, whereas our regulation and state programs insist on creating production instead of setting up creative centers and design centers. Whereas all the other world first test them in China and then in roboplants, we have a reverse trends. And that's the story about collectivism or individualism. There is more and more trend for individualization of production in the world. And our labor force has most success in this sphere. For instance, solo programmers, they are solo workers, but instead of supporting individual developers, we insist on creating large research centers, and all support money is spent on enhancing, increasing the the size of companies. At least we outlined some cultural effect and the problem that will have to be resolved in the process of this transformation. What we need is cultural support of individualism and of the qualities that exist now, and gives us a window of opportunities and a new potential in the technological economy. The level of marginality, I quite agree with it, is moving towards design with fantastic speed. And by the year 2035, which is the boundary of our outlook for NTI, all production facilities will have zero or negative marginality. They will be wholly automated based on CapEx, and real economy will operate in the OPEX zone, which will belong to creative and engineering sciences. This is a real possibility for opportunity for us because our engineers and creative workers can do it. Whereas making two the same automobiles or two similar refrigerators was never possible for us. Whereas mass-scale production requires that all products be the same. Our survey of 2011 says that when we surveyed the specifics of our compatriots in innovative sectors in US, Germany, and Russia, the US manager said, if you want to make one unique thing, order it with Russians. If you want 10 of the same, ask anywhere but the Russians to do it.
Спасибо.
Thank
Давайте мы
you.
попробуем немножко, так сказать, с вот этой высокого уровня,
Let's try to move from the high level,
близкого к философскому обобщению,
which is close to the
спуститься
philosophy.
немного
Let's go
на землю и
down
посмотреть, как это выглядит со стороны
closer
практиков,
to
работающих
earth
в бизнесе, в крупном бизнесе
and
и
ask for the opinion of the
бизнесе,
practical workers working in the
среднем.
large
Вадим,
and
можно
medium
попрошу
business.
вас,
Vadim, can I ask
сказать,
you,
как вам представляется,
what is your vision? Does the current situation provides new opportunities for the development of technological businesses, and what institutional and cultural changes are needed to make the maximum use of whatever we have now? First of all, let me tell you, what Alexander Sanch was telling us is very important for us, because together we made a large project together, measuring the culture at different plants. In Izhora plants, which were founded 3 centuries ago by Peter I, where the last emperor established the personnel. In Balashikha, founded by Nobel Prize winner Mr. Kapitsa about 60-something years ago, and one in Uralhimash plant, chemical engineering. And we looked at the social capital and cultural characteristics. That was the first part. Well, these figures were absolutely different. And all our programs where we accented on client services and creating new products. In other places, they focused on operational changes. So the processes were different. Well, it did not depend on our efforts. We used the same software. We even used more energy to measure these changes, to make changes. And we saw the answers to many questions. We understood what we should do and how to adjust our survey. Actually, Russia is so versatile in its cultural components. And unlike many other countries where it is more or less homogeneous, and you can see it in various surveys, whereas for Russia, we do not have such surveys. First, you have to understand the population, the people. The second, which is very important for us, what matters for us is the degree of confidence coming from our consumers. If there is confidence, we built the first on liquefying the natural gas. It was believed to be impossible because we did not have technologies. We do have technology, we have competencies. It's the question of trust, whether we trust each other or not. It is much more than just culture or historical roots. So what you see, what services you are provided, what is the quality of goods and technologies that you are getting, and still you get a closed circuit that you have to break out of. So what did we see? I've been working for 4.5 years at United Engineering Plants, and when I joined there, the clients never trusted us because 5 years ago we failed to fulfill the orders in time. So during the first year and a half, we tried to comply with the deadlines. For 2 years, we heard some complaints. Uh, we did have some complaints, and I felt responsible even for the times back to 1990, and we had to talk to every client, explaining things to them. So we called the customers, explaining them that we improved the situation. We are now doing everything on time. Then we had to resolve the issue of cost of production. So we coped with it. The third component was to design new products. That was more difficult to do. What did we come across? So in order to install any engineering equipment, excavators or mining equipment or anything else, so 2 or 3 years before, and you mentioned it, so Western designers had been selected before, and contracts had been signed before. So they made calculations, they provided a basic technology, and no space was left for us. For instance, everything is made out of aluminum, and aluminum welding is to be used, and only one German company can do it. No Chinese company, no French company can do it. No matter what product you can produce, you cannot install anything of your own, anything new. A few years ago, we understood that the only way is to get into the markets and to switch, to adapt ourselves to the changing reality. We didn't have the problem in the Soviet time because everything was designed by our institutes for our equipment and for our solutions. It's the Western companies that had the problem how to get to the Soviet Union, and the world changed. The world converted. So we can produce some things. We get certificates, but we were not made part of the system.
So about 2-3 years ago, we realized that we should transit from components and products to solutions. We have done that transition in the recent several years. Our oxygen production solution exceeded European solutions by 10% in energy efficiency. I mean European, including French solution. Nobody believed that at first, but later on they surprisingly recognized it, and they switched to our supplies. They now buy from us. Moreover, we no longer sell oxygen installations. We construct them and no one worries about risks. Steel, we use more better steel now of better quality and more efficient, and so no one is now concerned about possible delays and failures in production. Now we use our own excavators, and we sell oxygen, and we count it by cubic meters. The same applies to condensed gas, and some companies used to have outdated equipment, and certainly we did not fully trust them. But now let's get back to the role of the government. In many cases, investment or money is not needed in order to support innovations. We have many times mentioned one situation from the past. We used to invest into a plant which produced some devices for reactors. And we used to buy materials from Chevron, Shell, and so on. Now, we are not let to participate in bidding procedures in Russia. But finally, we have access to international consumers. And when our compatriots make sure that we sell our devices to foreign partners, they may start buying from us. This sounds like a paradox. This is our government's policy, and it is pursued by many representatives of ministries. But right now, nothing impedes us, but for our own considerations and goals. Yet another example. Now, another area with many problems, and this is the case not just in Russia, but also in China and other places, in the area of machine building. And this applies to machine building, to the mining sector, petrochemistry, production of equipment, and so on. There's a big decline in all areas related to raw materials. What are our forecasts? It's the right time to change our business model and to switch from Industry 4 to total digital technologies. And we made we did a lot in 2015. Well, you just started. Our plant, which is located 7 kilometers away from Moscow in the town of Balashikha, it's called Cryogenmash. It's they manufacture air splitting installations. And right now, they are digitalized. So they use 3D design and technologies. They have automatic and software-based computerized machines. And all software and all machines are linked to one and the same product code and demand code. So this helps to avoid many mistakes. If you have 1 million components, and if you have many codes, you will have thousands and tens of thousands of mistakes. In production, you will incur huge costs. However, our new system allows us to manufacture tailor-made products because they are linked to the same demand codes. Alexander has mentioned that Russia can produce unique things, and we do it in cryogenics due to digital technologies. However, the production costs are the same as the production costs of mass production. And but all products are tailor-made. And and it was designed by Russian engineers. In conclusion, let me Cryogenmash was originally founded by academician Kapitsa. He said it in 1950. Certainly, the true scientific idea will pave its way, but it's up to the people and to make it faster and better. So the crisis has revealed the same problem again. Now we need to balance this model properly. Our Russian model will never be fully technical or rental. I think it should be balanced, and it should be half rental and half technology-based. What did you suggest creating a hedgehog from mice? Oh no, from fox. But anyway, they are all mammals. And probably we need to genetically modify a fox, right, or mice, and develop a new animal with needles. Well, anyway, in conclusion, let me say that we need the same institutions, but they should be modified, restructured, and probably generate other values. And one of these values is some intellectual profit. Now, Gazprom Bank believes in our new idea. It's a risky investment, but still they have invested. And they agree that we need to modify our business model and transit to a new intellectual platform. Probably these tasks could be resolved by incubators. I have followed Vadim's presentation, and I think that future production will be, I'm just thinking about the right words, it will give many opportunities to design makers. I agree with you. Once a tailor-made production becomes viable and the production costs of tailor-made and mass products are the same, so it will mean that we work efficiently. However, we need even more capital for this tailor-made production. Certainly, we need automated systems, software, libraries for that, but we need specialists who will find the right options in the library and then develop a suitable design for that. Right now, the whole world faces the deficit of talented engineers. Many US companies come to Russia and set up design centers here because they want to employ talented engineers, and they can't find them in the USA. Certainly, they can employ them for good rates. We're at the probably lowest level here. In other words, we help them to outsource cheap intellectual resources, sort of which is similar to selling raw materials. However, I think we need to develop our system of technical education instead. In a way, it gives us some advantages because we have preserved our old school. But still, universities lag behind the real needs of contemporary economy. I would request the representative of Ministry of Education and Science, who is present here now, so it's Mr. Zwan, and I would request him to tell us what is done now. And let me quote what was said yesterday by the representative of the accounting chamber. She said that today we are still, her phrase was, we are still digging, today we are digging out yesterday's potatoes because we're very hungry. But I realize why this is done. I think there is some controversy here. The Americans that are coming here are not really competing for our engineers. Let me get back to what Alexander said. I think it's the main problem, and we should try and find some simple single solution. So we try to do it every year, but in a year some inspectors visit us and say that our solution was wrong. We are constantly trying to restructure our institutes and universities, and it never works, and in a year some experts discover that it was done wrongly. Once again, what about universities? They do not live in some separate environment. They do not live somewhere in the space, but we can't accuse universities of Russian people living for work abroad. I never said that, but well, it's not you. This is just a fact. Universities function they do what is expected by the society. If we look, for instance, and Kriagenmash, how they, for instance, they have an agreement with technical university named after Bauman to train specialists specially for their project. This is a good example. So I think the main problem of university is training specialists that are not in demand. This applies to design engineers and others. And
Я думаю, что вот
I
совершенно
think that
справедливо то, что будет совершенно перераспределена структура
the structure
востребованности
of
высшего образования.
demand
Там пирамида перевернется.
for different professions will be completely changed. And I think we are now at the point when the society will also be split. We're at the edge of big changes. The society will soon be split into different circles. There will be a narrow circle of specialists very much in demand. What is now done by universities? And what should be done? I think several solutions could be useful. Number one is to involve customers in educational programs. It could be corporate clients. I think this applies to training engineers. And some classes should take place at the premises of their potential customer. We already have done it. And once students spend some time on site, it's very useful for them. And they know what exactly is needed for their future profession. However, we can't do it everywhere. And we can't always teach students the techniques of tailor-made production. This was the first issue. The second is universities are not just educational centers, but also R&D centers. And we need to develop the research potential of universities. We are criticized by many people for low salaries of researchers and teachers. Universities now mainly develop as educational centers, and they develop twice faster than other institutions in Russia.
That because that we are becoming competitive globally, because the people do not choose between Moscow and Novosibirsk institutes, but between St. Peter or Novosibirsk. And the third thing produced by universities is technologies. Let's call them technologies. We tried to implement several projects. Strangely, they turned out to be a success. That creating engineering centers based at universities, supported by the project on cooperation between the universities and the industry. Industry invests money into university designs in order to set up new production. And the work on the reproduction of students' design bureaus. So the second idea that we got, which is implemented, is aimed at making as much design activities be incorporated into educational programs. From the very beginning, the students should be surrounded by this or that technical situations, technical environment. First of all, I'm speaking about engineers, highly skilled engineers. principle, one can have different attitudes to this. But university prepare and train quite competitive students and who have a global level. But then what happens with those graduates? Speaking about ADI, it's something which we should somewhat adjust or correct. First, we had certain logics which might have been controversial. We thought it should create institute and to support innovative processes by creating a favorable environment. But I think the correct thing is to produce a great many or sufficient number of somewhat crazy engineers with certain engineering skills, but who are possessed with implementing their engineering projects. If you look around and look at the history of the Soviet Union and what is happening globally, all breakthroughs started or came from these fanatical people who believe in what they're doing. If we happen to use their fanatism jointly with knowledge and skills, I think that will make a difference. I think we have enough people like this.
Спасибо, Александр Борисович. Я на самом
Thank
деле
you, Alexander.
позволю опять-таки себе прокомментировать.
Let me comment on it
Спорить
again.
с тезисами не буду.
I will
Действительно,
not argue
существует
with
парадокс,
your words. There
который
is a
заключается в
paradox
том, что, с одной стороны, все
that
понимают и
everybody understands
востребованность там, кадров
that
высококвалифицированных
highly
кадров, по
skilled
крайней мере, по
specialists
определенному
are
кругу
in demand.
инженерных специальностей. При этом вот я совершенно согласен
And
с тем,
I
что у
also
нас
quite
будет
agree
происходить
that
процесс изменения
there will be
конфигурации
changes in the
инженерных
configuration of the
специальностей
pyramid of
по
engineering skills
жизненному циклу продукта. Вот как бы вообще
versus the life cycle of the project.
принципиально моментом является переход от
We have to
принципа
shift
к
from the sectoral
принципу жизненного
principle
цикла.
to the life cycle principle.
Выделение категорий инженеров, там,
Identifying the
разработчиков,
categories of
инженеров,
designers, implementation engineers, operating engineers, repairing engineers in accordance with the life cycle of the product. It turns out that the contemporary engineering media with this computer-based engineering, it provided a unified tool for these stages.
сходство, так сказать, вот на этих этапах жизненного
As
цикла
for this,
больше, чем
there is more similarity at different cycles of the product than compared with different sectors. So the designer can design things, machinery from different sectors of population. And this is opposed by the rectors, professors of our industrial or sectoral technical institutes. For instance, the railroad man is the railroad man, and they will remain like this for another 150 years. It is somewhat exaggerated, but that's the reaction of any sectoral institute. When they say that operation manager, operation engineer is a profession, and it doesn't matter what he maintains, a nuclear station or a hydro station. There's a lot of demand for designers, and it grows exponentially in creative sectors, but not here,
проблема.
not
И
here. That is the problem.
я совершенно согласен с тем, что
And I
оказывается, что
absolutely
университеты
agree
что-то умеют готовить, но
that
при этом
universities
они
can
не
educate
востребованы в
students,
промышленности.
but
Поэтому,
the
наверное, должна
graduates
быть
are not
некоторая
demanded by the
синхронизация.
industry.
Я очень
There should be some
поддерживаю,
synchronization.
считаю это чрезвычайно важным,
And
чтобы
I believe it
вокруг университетов
important
проращивалось
that
индустриальное окружение.
there should
Фактически
be that
переход на
universities should be
модель,
surrounded
которую
by
там у нас традиционно физтеховской
industries,
называют, а вообще-то
industrial
это идет модель
surrounding.
там MIT и Стэнфорда.
It's the
Только
MIT
там
and Stanford
разница в том,
model.
что физтеховской модели,
The
по которой там
Physical
и
Technologies
Новосибирский университет,
Institute,
скажем,
or
работает
the
в еще более
Novosibirsk
выраженной
University
форме,
model,
это индустриальное окружение ВПК, а
is
в
industrial surrounding
современном
of the defense complex.
международном университете-интеграторе это индустриальное окружение технологического
Whereas
гражданского
in other
бизнеса.
cases,
Вот
it's the technological
этот
civic
шаг мы
businesses.
перейти не можем,
We
в
cannot
значительной мере,
make this
потому что
last step
технологического гражданского бизнеса у нас
because we
как
do
не
not
было,
have
так толком и нет.
technological civilian business. It's exclusively the matter of trust, as was mentioned. They have
Вот с
they
этим
have
я
to
не
trust
спорю.
each
С тем,
other.
что это
I do not argue with this. I'm not arguing.
микрофон.
Gazpromneft all of a sudden believed to the engineering center of Mathematical and Physical
Кто с этим
Institute.
спорит? Ну,
It turned out that they
согласен совершенно.
produce competitive graduates, competitive engineers. But it took years to achieve the situation. If we have those solo crazy engineers, they will make their own way. They will make it. Today is the 100th anniversary to Demikhov. He found the transplantology. He transplanted dogs' hearts back in 1930. The baker and the South African guy came here. He was met by the Minister of Healthcare, and he asked, "Where is Demikhov?" It's a purely institutional problem. Demikhov was a third-year student at the MGO medical faculty back in 1930 and made such surgery. Well, but the treatment was separated from science, and he did not have the right to practice as a doctor. And he was a laboratory worker at the laboratory at the university, and he had no right to make surgery. Well, some people got Nobel Prizes, and people wondered why it is not Demikhov who received the Nobel Prize, but it was prohibited for him to operate. Another example from television. Lavrenti Pavlovich Beria was involved with this TV project, and that guy quickly left for the United States. Well, these examples move into some other media. They confirm everything.
Ну, это как раз то, о чем Евгений Борисович говорил, что у нас
That is what Evgeny
креативная
was speaking
интеллектуальная среда,
about.
она такая жидкая,
The
она
creative
перетекает.
intellectual
Мы привыкли
environment is very
мыслить в
sparse,
терминах там монолитов.
whereas we used to think in terms of monoliths.
Слушайте, ну это отдельная тема. Если с
That's a topic
предпринимательством
of its
бороться
own.
культурно в течение 100 лет, то странно будет, что у нас будет много предпринимателей.
So it's no wonder we have a lot of businessmen if you fight for them. I mean, the Soviet writer and Russian writer Granin, Daniel Granin. 5 years ago, he said, a lot can be done in Russia if you not ask for permission. Well, a person should be stubborn and fanatical who does not care about other people's opinion, who will just move forward. A brief comment. Yesterday, I finished reading Akunin's third volume, Yermak went to Siberia and asked Ivan the Terrible's permission. Well, Ivan the Terrible decided not to allow, but he was too late to give his
Ну, как
banning
известно,
because
я
they
не помню
already
точно,
left.
кто из русских генералов,
I do
но
not remember who of the Russian generals
тоже, на самом деле,
where they
завоевали
conquered
без
Central
разрешения,
Asia
более или менее
without
случайно.
asking for
То есть,
permissions, sooner by
по крайней
accident.
мере, императорская власть
At
об этом
least
узнала задним
the
числом.
emperor learned about it
Да,
when
это-
it was too late, when it was conquered.
Знаете, вот у нас, я прошу прощения, у нас уже поджимает
I'm
время,
sorry we are
разговор
being
настолько
pressed for
интересный, мне,
time,
по крайней
and
мере,
the
интересно,
discussion has
слушать,
become
что
so
очень хочется
interesting.
все-таки расширить, так сказать, спектр.
I
Мы
would like
плавно
to
перетекли к теме
expand
социологии. Виктор,
and
можете
switch and
прокомментировать то, что
move to
говорилось, и, может быть, добавить
sociology. Thank you very much. It's a very exciting discussion focused on mice becoming hedgehogs. It's a huge topic for genetic engineering. Sorry for being economist, especially being a socialist economist. So it's becoming a norm to apologize. Well, people have a lot of suspicions about sociology, because sociology can explain anything. Why we have this kind of culture? Well, that's the way it should be, so you can get any explanation. And these informal and informal institutions, the track effects, the questions like mice and hedgehogs, etc., etc. Well, you needn't be a social economist to say this. I'll refocus our discussion and move from human capital to social capital and trust, it being very important. Several years ago, we started a survey of Russia focused on social capital. Well, economists need to listen to me. They know what it is. How many social relationships you have. So how many people you can ask to borrow your money, to water your flowers when you leave. How many people will come to your funeral. So we crossed it from our questionnaire. So how many links you have? It was a large survey conducted in 10 regions with a representative sampling. So after the survey in Crimea, we have to apologize twice. There was an abrupt increase of social capital from 14 to 15. The number of weak relationships doubled, and the number of strong relationships declined 1.5 times. When we published these data, it was followed by the polemics about the results, and we made a conclusion that a new civic society and the process of self-organization is going underway. No, it is just rehabilitation of the use of the old socialist institute of favoritism. If you look at the survey of surveying values, there is an inverse proportions, reverse relationship. The more you trust each other, the less we trust institute. The loop of misconfidence, distrust. So you have to have your doctor, your own doctor, your stomatologist, your professor, your own teacher, you know, many people of your own, so to say, whom you can make a call. And we made a rating of mistrust. The two most mistrusted institutions are police and hospitals, healthcare. Nearly half the population believe that policemen are a threat to the people. And the highest peaks are in Moscow and Dagestan. As for health care, 55% people prefer to die from self-treatment rather than going to hospital. So they will try anything rather than hospitals. So you have broader social context, you have more trust. When you get is ill, you call your friend, your friend's friend, or your friends who works in a clinic. Then there is an interaction. You enter this space, you follow the informal rules, pay the money in an envelope. So if you are well, you know that it's because you have good context. If everything is not okay, the level is falling, and the level of trust to the entire healthcare system, well, is destroyed absolutely. For institutions, the growth of capital is sort of a negative amount game. So we have a fall to formal institutions, starting with the authorities. There's absolute trust for the president. Well, there's just as much mistrust to the local authorities. There's the coordination between the number of contacts with the authorities and the level of mistrust. There are a lot of other interesting things. It varies depending on the institutional fields. It doesn't work in the educational institutions. They have a high credit of trust. That proves that there are plans of capital, and the educational institutes have this good correlation, which is different from the correlation which says that the more contacts we have, the less we trust them. With education, it doesn't work. So this is for the last 3 years. Alternative institutes are being formed, and we are falling down into the archaic times, and we rely on personal contacts through some personal relationships accompanied with the diminished trust to institutions. So it is strange to say that individualism and collectivisms are constants. When we speak about culture, include and the elements of genetics should not be compared with each other. Everything changes. Well, that which would be impossible in Europe. There's also a sad relationship between the typical barometer and the innovative barometer. So we also measure the trust to the scientific institutions. The progress allows us to resolve human problems that exist there.
Recently, there has been the confidence in formal institution has gone down. So we have very conservative views. I mean, that prevail. I mean, people mainly think that we don't need to give to invest into innovations, but we need to invest in the army only. That's their conservative approach, though they seriously mistrust official institutions. And however, this situation is changeable, and we need to survey the minds, the attitude of people, and try and change it if needed. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think that's an interesting approach. Let's discuss it, and let's work on that. This institutional picture and economic and social innovations, well, they are all elements of the same chain, and the innovations are based on technologies. and they affect the social infrastructure via economics, because today's society is represented by the people with mobile phones, by planes and other devices and other technical achievements. There are some experts present here. I'm very thankful to the contributions of our panelists, but we have some other experts here. Here's Ekaterina Shapочka, representing the expert council of the government. Good afternoon. This has been an extremely interesting panel discussion. Probably it's well, I have to speak at the end of this discussion, but I'll try to be brief. Still, let me say a few words. I'll give you several examples. You probably hear about the Sberbanks of Russia program, which is called Business Environment. This is a comprehensive solution for entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs that come to Sberbank, the savings bank of Russia. And we have sold about 1,000 of these solutions. And that was the end of the program, because there were very few people interested in it. The second case refers to ITs. I cooperated with one technical expert. He specialized in Booper, and he put forward a new idea, came to the government, but they advised, they said it was more profitable to invest into the infrastructure, new roads, and so on. And nobody tried to understand his idea. If they had, probably that could have generated about $1.5 billion into the USA. Let me recall the book on the rental, the model of state administration in Russia. The book makes a very pessimistic conclusion on the rental model. It states that Russian people have the so-called short-term thinking, and they are not interested in any risky business. They do not. They are unwilling to undertake responsibility for their own survival. They are afraid to be self-employed. So I think we need to change the whole culture of entrepreneurship. Let's recall Skolkovo. We know that 8,500 entrepreneurs have applied to Skolkovo during these 5 years. However, the USA receives about 50,000 applications annually. And how can we change the culture? How can we increase the group of entrepreneurships? Well, this may be done by the joint effort of business schools, the schools of entrepreneurship. I have discussed it with several experts, and they say that students and entrepreneurship will find some bottlenecks, and these bottlenecks will be located in Sheremetyevo or Domodedovo. This is a joke, certainly. But recently, I spoke to the administration of one big region. They didn't know their own number of entrepreneurs. And that's why I think the goals that you have mentioned and the project are extremely important. Social psychologists are now developing the idea of new specialized internet. And Russian investors are talking about it. That's all I meant to say. Thanks a lot. I agree with you. And this need to increase the number of entrepreneurs dramatically. This is the first main idea. Also, we should make the status more prestigious. And finally, we must upgrade the training of entrepreneurs. You can't really train someone to become an entrepreneur, but we can teach them some practical skills. And this sometimes, when working with startups and venture funds, we discover that some specialists like engineers may be brilliant as technical specialists, but they know nothing about business. They are completely illiterate here. And many people, technical people, many people in Russia know nothing about entrepreneurship. And as to young businessmen, they are amazingly illiterate in the area of business and entrepreneurship. Let's compare this to the situation in the USA. Even in junior school, when pupils, for instance, make some things with their own heads at the so-called lessons of domestic studies, or for instance, when they make some article of furniture with their own hands, they are immediately taught by teachers selling skills, how to sell them in the market. This was forbidden back in the Soviet time, and this is not done now either. Well, as to the national technology initiative, we should find the priority direction. What shall we focus on? On eliminating obstacles or on minimizing our efforts? We are not creating markets. Some markets are emerging, and we can see that. But there always are some costs. If we want, we need to reduce transactional costs if we want these markets to develop successfully. Rather than, so we need to reduce transactional costs, rather than investing into certain products. I regularly raise this subject. I'm always amazed when some new laws are introduced and on business, and no one tries to count transactional costs for businesses. You know, recently I had a wonderful example. There are some governments, ITs. Many governmental agencies now have their own IT systems. And all entrepreneurs have to interact with the government through these ITs, but no one counts how much it costs. medium, small businesses. Also, very few, many people do not understand how these systems work, and no one predicts how they will work.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that I don't speak Russian, so I will try and speak English beautifully and relatively slowly.
David, I'm sorry. Можно попросить поднять руки тех, кому
May I request,
не нужен перевод?
please raise your hands, those who don't
let's
need
go English.
interpretation.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you for letting me speak in English. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the debate. I think I'm the only non-Russian here on the panel. I just wanted to comment on a few things because we're talking about entrepreneurship and we're talking about some of the behaviors. My own experience of working with Russian people is that they're every bit as entrepreneurial, every bit as creative, every bit as hardworking as a German, an American, a British person, which I originally am now living in Ireland. And I think that it's not for me to debate the role of the Russian state or Russian institutions, but certainly the products that I've met of the institutions in which you gentlemen work have been of the very highest caliber around the world. And I just want to say that I'm from England too, and English people are always very hard on themselves too. So I think it was a very interesting debate. Just a couple of points that I wanted to make about maybe developing a culture of innovation. I think that you mentioned, Igor, that in American schools kids get taught to be confident, essentially. And Alexander, I was very interested in your comments about human capital. And I think, again, you also referenced this. I think from a Google perspective, our view is that you can't teach innovation, you can't teach entrepreneurship, but if someone demonstrates some initial ability, then you certainly shouldn't try and stop them. And when I think about the Russian businesses that I have interacted with, I see incredible potential. And I see that my main area of interest is helping Russian businesses win outside of Russia. So great Russian businesses who can sell holidays, who can sell domestic goods, who can sell anything from a television to whatever is made here. And I am very, very hopeful that actually there is a very solid economy here. If I look at our own business here, and my colleagues to my right here will back this up, we see a fast-growing business, a well into double-digit growing business year on year. Okay, this isn't a going down business; this is a going up business. If I look at Google, and this is spend of Russian companies outside of Russia using Google's products. And so you might know Google's products, you might know the search bar, you might know YouTube, for example, and this is something where we would very much like to help Russian companies grow even further. And with the help of the gentleman here on the panel, both entrepreneurially and from an educational perspective, I'm very, very confident. There are some great stats from McKinsey about European businesses. If they invest in digital, but also if they invest in entrepreneurship, they grow twice as fast. They are 3 times as likely to survive in the next 5 or 10 years, and they're between 10 and 20% more profitable. So what I'd like to leave the panel with is I'd love to spend some more time on this, is I think the Russian businesses with the entrepreneurship and the commercial view that we've talked about today can really win in international markets. And when I look at our own business and I look at how well that some Russian businesses are doing, particularly in the IT sector, but not just IT, I'm very, very hopeful about how we can develop with you into the future. So I'm speaking in English, so I'll be relatively brief. But I just wanted to respond to some of the comments about the potential of the Russian economy, and we see a very bright future, and certainly very keen to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And I think that Google, as well as other international multinational corporations doing technological business here in Russia, they are playing a very valuable role in the entire ecosystem of the economic development, bringing up the competences and best practices of the global economy, global business. That's exactly the view which is missing for a lot of the domestically oriented entrepreneurs and engineers. Спасибо большое. Сергей Недорослев, «Деловая Россия». Последний комментарий.
Now Sergei Nedraslov representing
Да,
Деловая Россия Society. Your comments, please. But I would rather talk about manufacturing. Well, how it all works. We have an engineering center. We now manufacture metal cutting machines. 12 years ago, we set up an engineering center. Our proceeds are 100 million US, and we have created 60 workplaces for workers. 30 of them we gave out to the state. This was our form of attacks. And $2.7 billion was actually taken by the government, and we received only 2. Well, probably we should give 10 million to the state, and better, we received $20 million. So during 12 years, I received 2.7, while the government received 30, and I paid 60 to engineers. I'm an entrepreneur, and I did it all to earn. If the government takes that much, it's not interesting, not profitable for me. Second, we now have 5 industrial sites in different cities. And the less money we receive, the less funds we receive from the government, the less trouble we have with different returns and so on. And also, we had many problems with machines. We manufacture very complicated machines, and if you take these machines for 20 years, it's really so troublemaking. It's just the time to get married and to divorce. So we should guarantee, we can guarantee that we don't need any assistance from the government. We better stick to business relations. If we are not trusted enough, we can always sell these machines. What are we concerned about? I'm not a specialist in development institutions, as someone said here, but I have some concerns. If one small engineering center generates $30 million and we give them back to the state, if all my centers also gives this money to the government, what will happen to this money? Maybe I better retain this money.
You can even export our machinery. There's Lord Devendorf, who used to be the Minister of Economy in Germany. Just leave those taxes in people's pockets. They will make better use of them than any state, even if the state has noble goals. And the third but not last, I fully agree with Alexander about education. That is human capital. Well, in engineering center, everything is human capital. They have just chairs and people and computers too. Because there's no engineering without computers. Yes, they have computers, but not that many. I mean, by price paid for them, they're cheap. Now see what happens. We have 100 engineering institutions, but we have to make every institute be such that they would attract those crazy engineers, because the Institute of Higher Learning, if we're interested people, if we're interested in each other, we can sit here for 5 hours listening to
15
each
минут
other.
отсюда выгонят, потому что
We
там
have to be
русские-
turned out in 15 minutes. So we did it ourselves, and the institute or the rector or the team will will make the institute attractive to the people. That's important, because human capital cannot be imported. If you do not make it yourself, you will not get it. So you have to pay just as much attention. Well, that's great, certainly. As I said, we have 2 people employed in the engineering center, where they have 600 during 12 years. But where are these people who have worked in this research
То есть
center
таким
or
образом
scientific
вы
center?
интегрируетесь в глобальную среду,
So you
правильно?
are integrated in the global environment. So if the person has worked in our center and then goes somewhere, well, we do not object. We know how things stand there, because they know their machinery, and we talk to our customers, explaining them how nice our machinery are. Well, and somebody said to me, "Yeah, so convincing." So you have to take a decision. Sometimes you don't need the entire machine, you just need a small part. And that opens up huge markets for us. There are hundreds of people who would make a good business out of it, out of producing this small detail. But it's not up to us, because we should produce whole machineries or machines. And there might be thousands of small companies who can produce those small minor parts. Let me tell something else. We did. Somebody did the stem. Somebody made a rope. Something like this. I'm opposed to claiming that we are so clever, we're intelligent, but let people do whatever they can do. If every person produces something, anything, everything will be okay. Each one should do
Ну, по крайней мере,
something.
мешать им не надо.
At least do not interfere with them. You should make them do
Спасибо,
things. You were right, showing them movies,
Сергей Григорьевич,
you know.
Спасибо большое. На самом деле,
Yes, thank you very much.
это тоже и про социальный капитал, и про
This
пропаганду.
relates to social capital and propaganda. As for taxes, let me comment on this. I cannot refrain from it. It's something belonging to institutional
Нет,
affairs.
подождите, государство... Знаете, я ведь много лет проработав в частном
I've
бизнесе,
worked many years in private business, but still the last 6 or 7 years I worked in a state-owned company, and I made a discovery. The discovery is that the state, at least our state, can do nothing else but take money from somebody's pocket and put them into another's pocket. But practice shows that some states can think and develop strategies and policies, whereas it does not happen in this country. Any discussion results in the fact how much you should pay somebody and where should you take this money, and this gives rise to a tax system which is very depressive for the development of economy, innovations. It's a well-known fact that in all countries where they have VAT, they have to make special benefits for companies operating, working with the human capital with interest. VAT is a tax which demotivates people in creating value added. And the VAT presence is not made up for any other tax instruments. It's a very important topic, and we have to get back to it. Unfortunately, now the trend is quite opposite. The tax burden is going to grow despite all the assurances from the government. It turns out, well, some people say, let's leave the money with the enterprise and everything will be okay. But it seems to me that it is for the managers. And we again started a discussion. Our tax system is rent-based. Because what is tax? Tax is payment for the charges for the production of public good. You need this, do you need that? You need this propaganda, do you need road? Yes. The taxes should work to create that infrastructure which cannot be provided by a private business. 15 years ago, we made T-shirts. You remember? There was the campaign, pay your taxes and sleep calmly. So we made the T-shirts with inscription, I do pay taxes, and what do I get? So this is the question of transition to inclusive institutes.
Александр Александрович точно не вас не забирал.
Alexander did not take your money, for sure. I can dispose of this money instead of giving it to you. I can assure you that if the taxes, if the money is left with the businessmen, they will make a better use of them. Why do the Swedes withdraw a lot and the Americans withdraw little? The question is not how much they take, but what they do with them. And look at the Finns. Well, the things do not tick off, you know. There were programs of debureaucratization, and there was the reduction. It was done by the request of the World Bank. So the taxes were reduced by 20%, and did the businesses invest this money into development? No. So they just lumped this money down, used them, so I'll just hid them somewhere. So everybody behaves in a different way, or sometimes in a similar way. Thank you. So that gives rise to myths. It's not business. These are speculative transactions where people hid money, dig money out into the earth, down into the earth. Hundreds of plants are out of work. Let's understand one thing. So people, some plants earn 300% on military orders. Well, colleagues, I'm speaking about something else. This is an attempt to resolve the problem in this way. It is they who interfere with us. Let's give us freedom and we shall do everything. So you got your freedom, but nothing gets out of it. No freedom, it's bad. You got freedom, it's good. Probably something should be changed elsewhere. I'm not talking about technological enterprises. I'm grateful to them. I know you for many years, and I'm amazed at what you're doing. But I'm thinking how it can be adjusted so that we had success in not in individual cases, but much frequenter. Some fundamental things have to be changed. Yes, thank you for this.
Спасибо. Коллеги,
Thank you,
я на самом
colleagues.
деле, мы действительно уже на полчаса почти
We are
задержались по
nearly
сравнению с планом.
half an
Нам
hour
надо
behind the
завершать
schedule, and so we have to
дискуссию.
wind up
Я,
our
во-первых,
discussion.
хочу всех поблагодарить.
I would like to thank
Мне
everyone.
лично было чрезвычайно интересно.
I
Я
found it
надеюсь, что
very
я был не
interesting,
единственный.
and I hope
Спасибо
I'm not
большое.
the only one in this. Thank you.